ARE Podcast, episode number 24.
Welcome to the ARE Podcast. ARE Podcast, where it's all about encouraging and inspiring you today so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a licensed architect tomorrow. And now your host. His favorite candy bar is a Snickers. David Doucette.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode 24 of the ARE Podcast, and joined once again by our co-host, Eric Corey Freed. And today we are talking about getting into consulting. So this is an interesting topic. Maybe you're having trouble finding full-time work, or maybe you're seeking an alternative to the full-time lifestyle. So we're gonna talk all about that. Eric, how are you?
I'm great. I was just thinking, if this is episode 24, for episode 25, is there a cake, or do you get me a card?
I don't think we start celebrating milestones till episode 100. So
right.
I'll get you a card at episode 100.
Fair enough. This is I'm excited about this episode, in part because I think we have a lot to say about it, but also in part because I don't think it's something typically a young architect would even consider in the realm of possibility, but it really is something they should know about as a viable way to build experience and also make money at the same time.
And as we'll find out, it's as you just said, it is a very viable way, and it's kind of thinking outside the box. But from our purview, with our sort of years in the business, this is very much possible for a young architect to do what we're going to talk about. So we're talking about getting into consulting. And I guess, what are the reasons, first of all, we'd want to get into consulting?
Well, maybe you can't find a job. When I did it, it was because I didn't want a job. I had enough jobs at that point. But maybe you can't find a job. Maybe you don't feel like going back to a full-time grind. Or maybe you just haven't been able to find the right firm really to call home yet, and you want to keep looking, but can't afford to not work. So this is a way for you to perhaps make money while you look for the perfect job.
And not everybody is cut out for the 9-to-5 lifestyle. So this is something that you could make, and people do make, a career of consulting.
Yeah, I mean. I know a lot of people. The funny thing about consultants is they all start to know each other. And so you start becoming friends with these guys, in part because they're the ones that are free on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. to go have coffee. So you end up being friends with those guys. So I know hundreds of them, and then we even kind of share notes about things like contracts and consulting gigs and services.
And I think now, and we'll get into your strategies in a second, but I think one of the great things about consulting now is, as in many industries, consulting is a big thing. There's a need for consultants, and one of the reasons is, after the crash back in 2007, 2008, the economy has come back. But firms, both architecture and any sort of business firm, have been more reluctant to hire, especially the smaller architecture firms, because of that. So everybody's trying to run a leaner, meaner machine. And once we hire a full-time employee, that's workers' comp, that might be insurance, that might be a whole slew of other things, where if they can just hire a consultant, it saves them the expenses. And they're not committed long term, because sometimes with these architecture firms, they might only have a job for 3 months, so they don't want to hire a full-time person for 3 months.
Well, remember, they not only are the lessons of the economic collapse of 2008 still fresh in everybody's mind, where they had to let people go, good people that they didn't want to let go, but the idea of hiring somebody, getting their hopes up, and then paying benefits, and then having them leave after a project ends 3 months, 6 months, or even a year later, ultimately hurts their firm. Financially, it's expensive. It's not great for morale. But hiring a consultant they could come to you and say, well, we'll hire you, we'll pay you hourly. You're coming in as a consultant. You know, we're not paying you benefits. You're actually providing a solution for them, and we'll get into that a little bit in a moment.
All right, so here we are talking about consulting and and we have 5 strategies that somebody who might be interested in this can try, whether they can't find a full-time job or maybe they had a full-time job and they want to try this consulting and get a little more free time, or so we think, right? So how do we want to start?
Well, I want to start. I want to start with a story, and it's a story I told on the last podcast at the end. So now I want to tell it at the beginning, so everybody can actually hear it. And
you mean we don't have to wait 58 minutes to hear this story this time?
No, I'm not gonna torture you. But it's a story that's really relevant to what we're talking about today. And so I was, I had just moved to San Francisco. On the move to San Francisco, I had interviewed with 21 firms. I kind of called every firm in the phone book and got to know every firm and set up 21 interviews.
This is your young career as an architect.
This is my young career. The year is 1997, and I had already had a lot of experience at that point, and so I had 21 interviews and 21 job offers because it was 1997 and things were booming in San Francisco at the time, and I narrowed it down from 21 to a few firms, and then finally to one, and I picked one, and I started working there. But after 6 months, I was unhappy with the firm, and I was unhappy with the work, and I started just by accident. I'd gotten a freelance project on the side, and this is why we talked about this last week, because we were talking about moonlighting, but I'd gotten this kind of one project, and it was a house. It was a whole house. It wasn't big enough for me to quit my job and afford to just work on that, right? There wasn't enough fee for it. But it also wasn't small enough that I could ignore it. It was something I really wanted to do. So I was doing this crazy schedule where I'd work all day for the firm, and then at night I'd kind of work all night on this house. And I was exhausted and confused and grumpy, and
nothing has changed.
Yeah, really.
You're still confused, exhausted, and grumpy.
I'm still very grumpy. And then, but eventually I ended up leaving the firm. I ended up kind of saying, well, this is crazy. Let me just kind of roll the dice. I started, so I quit the job, let go of that day job and that regular income, which was a terrifying thing, and focused just on this one project. The one project then, of course, fell through, and that's a horrible story. But suddenly I was left with no job and no projects and no prospects for money. And my girlfriend at the time said, so what are you going to do now? You know, kind of one of those looks. She said, are you going to get another job? And my instinct was no. I didn't want another job. I was feeling ready to be off on my own. I'd wanted that for a long time. And so before kind of saying, fine, I'll just take any old job, I went back to those other firms that I had interviewed with that had given me a job offer that I knew a little bit, and I decided that maybe I could do something for them. So here's where I want to get into the 5 strategies.
Before we do that, so you quit your full-time day job. Was it because of the projects weren't interesting, or was it sort of a bigger issue of, it's just not for me, like I need to find another way for me to be happy in this profession? Because you knew at some point you wanted to go out on your own.
Yeah, it was a number of things. One, the projects were a little misrepresented to me. When I had interviewed, they had sold me that, all of our projects are innovative and sustainable and interesting, and we need somebody like you to come in and do it. And when I got there, we were actually just doing very vernacular looking, what I would call Napa Valley farmhouse, winery type houses.
Okay.
And so it just, I felt like I'd been misled a little bit. And also that kind of work was, to me, was getting boring, cranking out a bunch of high-end houses for people that design-wise were pretty, I could kind of do them in my sleep at that point in my career.
So you wanted more. And I guess the point I'm getting is, some of us want more. Some of us are happy getting whatever we get. But there was something inside of you that was more than just the job, because it sounds like many people would love to have that job. Many of our listeners would be like, it's a great job. But for you, it was like, no, that's not my path. I need something more.
No, a normal, healthy person would have loved that job and done really well with it. But I'm impatient. I've always been impatient, and I've always been eager to try new things. And it's in one sense, it's been good. But in another sense, it's always put me in these situations where, okay, suddenly I have no job and I have no more freelance projects. What do I do?
Yeah, it's a catch-22. It's I think the mind of an entrepreneur. It's the mind of somebody who likes different things. Or, oh, there's a shiny new object over here. Let me go over there for a little bit. Oh, there's another shiny one over here. And the reason I'm setting all this is because if you are like that, then what we're talking about and what we're about to talk about, the consulting, could be a way to make it work for you.
Well, plus you're like that, so I think that's why you're able to speak about it so well. But yeah, exactly. I wanted more, but more importantly, I felt confidence that I could do more. But I didn't. Here's the thing: it wasn't at all what my plan was. I had written out this. Oh, I'm going to save up 6 months worth of expenses in a bank account, and then go off on my own, and I even had a mini marketing plan of how I would attract clients, and I was gonna join different clubs to network with people. I didn't get to do any of that because I made a very sudden, rash decision that left me unemployed.
And I think, and it wasn't before the internet, because I was in New York about this time. It was dial-up, and AOL was the only game in town. So it wasn't like the internet was a huge resource. So the point being, like, you had to figure a lot of this stuff out yourself. You had to figure out, hey, let me go talk to these firms and see if I can get some work from them.
I didn't even have a roadmap to do it. I just kind of had the only thing that I really had was I had the benefit of having interviewed with 21 firms and working for one of them. So I had 20 other firms that I had a contact at, and nobody. It was 97, so nobody was really even using email back then. So you'd call on the phone, you leave messages. It was the olden days. But,
and just let me stop you there, just so for our listeners understand, there wasn't always email. Just so you know, I just want to clarify that we weren't just Okay, that was it.
It was hard. Yeah, it's hard to believe, really. But so I have these 5 strategies, and I think all of you should at least try them out, because they really kind of put you in the mindset of a consultant to begin with.
And what you did, before we get into the strategy, so you did approach these firms that you interviewed with, and you were able to essentially consult with, I think, 3 of them, right?
I ended up developing a long-term relationship with 3 of them, which is really all I wanted. I wanted, a few. I mean, I wasn't going to work for all 20. That'd be crazy. But I thought if I can just find 2 or 3, that would be enough to supply me with enough work that I could kind of hop around between the 3 and eat and pay rent while I look for other projects for myself. That was really the goal.
Right. Okay. And it sounds like the bigger issue is, because I can relate to this, is just something inside of you, like there's got to be more, or you're looking for something, and sometimes you don't even know what it is. But I'm going to try it and take the leap of faith.
Yeah, faith is faith in oneself really was the key. Where at that point, I'd had 5 or 6 years of incredible experiences, really leading projects and doing a lot. And I was itchy. I was 26, 27 years old. And, everybody had said to me, by the time you're 30, you're going to want to start going off on your own. But nobody tells you ever how to do that.
Right. Exactly. All right. So our 5 strategies to try. What's strategy number 1?
Well, strategy number 1 is actually, before you talk to anybody, is to know what you can offer them. So the very first thing I did was I took a sheet of paper and I started writing out all of the things that I could do that I thought would be valuable to somebody. And I wasn't trying to say, what are the things I want to do? It wasn't about me at all. It was really about, what could I do for other people? What could I do for them? Whether I enjoyed it or not, I was really in desperation mode of just trying to find things that I could do that would make money. So some of the list was pretty obvious. I could do watercolor renderings and colored pencil renderings. I could do things like that. I could do CAD file management, and develop CAD systems. Some of it was really mundane, boring stuff, but it was just, if anything, it was almost a confidence boosting exercise of just making a list of, here's what I know I can do that is of value to other people. You look confused.
No, I'm with you. All right. So number one, we're going to make the list of basically our value, our asset, our contribution to a firm, and some of us might not think, well, I don't have that, and I would just question that you do. We've been through architecture school. We have worked maybe some in a firm. We have more skills than we realize sometimes, and it takes that moment of just sitting down and writing down, and you might think you only have one or two, and before you know it, you get a list of 10.
Yeah, and then some of the skills, I was trying to be as specific as possible. So I remember one of the skills was project management for projects up to $3 million with Type 5 construction. It was that specific, because I didn't want to misrepresent myself either. I didn't want to get myself into trouble. I wanted to be very honest about what I was able to do, because I needed to hit the ground running. I needed to be able to go into these firms and just produce work quickly, and I didn't want to have any misunderstandings.
And the more specific you can be is going to be more attractive to the potential person who's going to hire you as the consultant, because, if somebody walks up to me and says, hey, I'm looking for work, you got anything I can do? I'm probably going to say no. But hey, I'm looking for some work, and here's 5 things I can do. Does any of these, appeal to you? And I'd look and be like, oh yeah, I could use you to do this. So yeah, be specific, make your skills be specific. What's number 2?
Number 2 is you want to say, okay, now that I have this list of skills, who would want them? So you want to create a list of firms that you either know, or maybe they're firms that you admire and have always wanted to have a relationship with, or always wanted to kind of get into. And they need to be firms that would benefit from these skills. And oftentimes it might not be an architecture firm. That's the other thing. It could be an engineering firm. It could be a real estate development firm. It could be a contractor. You've got this list of skills now, and you're going in knowing what you can do for them. So you equally need to know who would benefit. Maybe you're just flipping through the phone book or going through, an online directory of list of firms or something. But ideally, firms that you'd want to consult with, and you don't really need more than 5 to 10 to start with. It doesn't need to be a huge list, but just it's your list of targets of who you're going to call and who you're going to pitch on what you could do for them.
And then how do you? Okay, let's say somebody is interested in you. They want you to come in for an interview, which, by the way, we've talked about that in previous episodes, and interviewing and resume and cover letter, and definitely check those out. But what is the pitch? What's my pitch if I'm coming in as a consultant? Because I don't want a full-time job. So how do I sort of pitch it that I'm interested in work you have, but I'm also going to be working for other people too?
Well, you call them up and you say, hi, do you remember me? Or hi, we've never met, but we're friends with so-and-so. Try to use some way to connect with them again. And you say to them, do you have any projects that I can consult on? Any projects that you need help with? I'm not looking for a job, but do you have anything that I could, that I could help you with? There's a lot of things that I could do for you. And this is where step number 1 comes into play, because you could rattle off a list of, I could do project management, I could do CAD management, I could train your staff on Revit, I could, there's a list of things that you don't realize that you know how to do that you could really apply to what they're doing. Ideally, you would know the firm a little bit. You would have gone to their website and checked them out and know what their type, if they do healthcare design, don't pitch them on the fact that you can do residential. It's not gonna fly. But if they do healthcare design, then pitch them on the fact that you could, you could do CDs, like nobody's business, and really just hit the ground running.
What's your strategy? Because it's a little bit like cold calling, that salespeople do essentially. What's your strategy to sort of get your foot in the door, to get somebody to get past the receptionist, I guess?
You have to get somebody who's working on a project. So to get past the receptionist, you ideally don't want to go through the front door with everybody else, because you'll probably be dismissed as, someone else who's looking for work. you ideally want an introduction. You could leverage your friends, leverage your networks. You could leverage LinkedIn as a great way to find out who to contact. Ideally, you'd want to look for a title like project manager, project architect. And let's say you find them on LinkedIn, it's easy enough to call the receptionist and then ask for them. And the receptionist is typically a gatekeeper, but usually only for the principal of the firm. More, kind of a scripted call would be calling the project manager, who the receptionist probably isn't fielding calls for. And instead, you could probably get right through to her or his voicemail. And, you'd want to leave a message or at least start a conversation like this. Hi, you don't know me, but I'm friends with so-and-so, mutual acquaintance. And I'm looking for some consulting work. There's a lot of things that I could do that would benefit you. Do you have 5 minutes so we can chat about how we could work together?
And I like the idea of starting off with maybe somebody but yeah, the gatekeeper, a secretary as a gatekeeper of an architecture firm is not going to be very hard to get by. The industry's not like that. So, but a couple of good points you made. Number one is leveraging friends, so your friends' firms, because they're working, so they may know and their boss may know, we would love to hire, David for 3 months. So ask your friends and be persistent, and also, kind of keep asking, because so often, people would send me resumes, you got anything I can do? Not looking for a full-time job, kind of what we're talking about. But, I'm just like looking for some work. And, my usual response is no. But, a couple months later, and I wasn't good at keeping track of who emailed me when kind of stuff, but a couple months later, it'd be like, oh, I wish I had somebody to do this work for the next 2 months. Had that resume come in then, or had somebody contact me at that moment, I've been like, sure, here's the work. So it's such a timing thing.
Timing is critical, because I can tell you that, in January, someone might ask me, hey, you got anything I can do? And I'd say no, but I might like them and remember them, but I'm not going to save them. I don't have a folder of cool people. But then if they contact me in March again and I go, oh, I remember this guy. I liked him or her. But now I do need somebody. And I have ended up hiring a lot of consultants just through timing.
And it's okay to, if you're talking with somebody and they don't have anything, at the moment, you can say, do you mind if I check back with you in a month, or just give you, and they'll usually say, yeah, and just do it, so stay top of mind, it's like we're auditioning for something. I
do have a funny story.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was in this situation. I was looking for work, and a buddy of mine, and I didn't know many people in San Francisco, by the way, but a buddy of mine said, I heard a rumor through the grapevine that so-and-so firm is got a lot of work, and they're, and they need help. But they don't have a job posting yet, because maybe internally they didn't know if they could commit to a full-time person. But they just got a lot of work, and they don't know what to do. So I called the principal of the firm. There was a gatekeeper there, and I couldn't get through her. I kept, well, can I speak to Ted?
These are not the droid you're looking for. It didn't work.
Right. No, and she's what is this regarding? And I couldn't get past her. Finally, I called back the next day, and I said, yeah, can I talk to Ted? And she said, who's calling? And I said the magic words. Yeah, this is Eric Corey Fried returning his call.
Returning his call, yes. Love it.
And she's like, oh, okay. And I went right through.
Yep.
Ted picks up the phone, and he's like I'm sure he's wondering, who the hell is Eric Corey Fried? And he picks up the phone. He's like, yeah. I'm like, Ted, you don't know me at all, but I heard from Kirk, who works at ABC, firm, that you guys are busy and you might be looking for help. And he said, you heard that already? I said, it's a small grapevine, but I heard this, and I've got this list of skills. So you're becoming Liam Neeson in Taken, where you're like, I have a particular list of skills that are valuable. You're becoming that guy. You're becoming a little more aggressive. You're not asking, please give me a job.
Well, here's what I love about this, and I think Ted's response sums it up. It's like, you heard about that already? So obviously he's like, I've got somebody sharp on the other end of this line, because we haven't even announced this yet. So if they're sharp enough to be plugged into the grapevine, like, that's somebody I'm going to at least want to have an interview with.
it was timing and luck. It was a lot of it, but it was also me being much more aggressive than I would be if I was asking for a job, where I'd be polite and much more mannered.
Yeah, you have to be persistent, and I think this is much easier if you're in sort of a metropolitan area. If you're where I grew up in Podunk, Hinsdale, New Hampshire, this is going to be hard. I don't even know how many architects are in the area. There's probably a few in that sort of Keene area. But if you're in a metropolitan area, San Francisco, New York, Boston, LA, this you should be able to do this. If you got your stuff together, you should be able to find work for sure.
Yeah, but look at also what you as the consultant are offering. Ted now, he was struggling with, do we have enough work to hire a full-time person? I don't want to bring in a person and have them leave after 9 months when the project's over. Suddenly I'm coming in saying, well, I can hit the ground running. You can hire me hourly. There's no benefits. I'll buy my own insurance. And so what you end up doing is you're actually providing them a solution to a problem that they've been struggling. And that's kind of the best part.
That's the best part. And that's sort of what you're pitching if you can eventually get sort of the interview, or sometimes it's not even an interview. Sometimes just come in and let's meet. But that's what you're pitching, the benefit that you bring to them. Now, I will say, depending on your state, what we're talking about is consultant work, 1099 stuff. Different states are more lenient about this stuff than others. And what I mean by this is the states, in California for sure, frowns upon employers who just have 1099s or consultants who are actually full-time employees, because the employer, as we're talking about, is not paying. If they have a bunch of 1099s or consultants, they're not paying workers' comp. They're not paying they're not paying into the unemployment fund. So the state frowns upon that. So just be sure, we're not advocating for, being an employee, but trying to be a 1099. We're talking about a real consultant job, short-term position kind of stuff here.
Yeah, you're not trying to sidestep or get your foot in the door and become an employee through some sort of weird means. You're really doing this. Ideally, you do it with more than one firm. You would have these types of relationships with multiple firms, and really pitch yourself out as a consultant, meaning that you are buying your own health insurance every month, which is not as expensive as everybody makes it out to be, and you are paying your own taxes, which is as expensive as everybody makes it out to be.
Well, the health insurance is as expensive as everyone makes it out to be, but that's a whole nother. Not even it. I don't know what you're paying, but mine's ridiculous. Anyway, and I'm healthier than you, so how does that work out?
I don't know. I'm non-smoker.
You're smoking, drinking, So, you don't even drink. You don't touch anything.
No, I'm pure as the driven snow.
You've never had alcohol, right? You're
I've tried it.
Oh, you have? Okay.
It's not my thing. Yeah, I don't like it.
But what I like about this consulting strategy, too, is if you are good at what you do, and I want you, the listener, to hear this and be aware of this. If you are good at what you do at this consulting work, you are very much in the minority. There's not a lot of people doing consulting work, and there's even less of that pool doing it who do it well. So if you do it well, as you found out, Eric, you will develop these long-term relationships with several firms, which is a great position to be in, because if one firm doesn't have work right now, well, I got a couple other, so all my eggs aren't in one basket, they're spread out.
Yeah, so of the 20 firms that I had remaining, there were some clear standouts. Basically I'd whittled down that list to 4 or 5 that I really connected with them. I liked the culture, I liked the people, and they'd all given me offers. So I didn't call all 20. I only called those kind of 5. And it was, hey, remember me from 6 months ago when you offered me a job and I turned it down? Ha ha ha, awkward pause, right? And well, I'm looking for stuff to do. I'm looking for work. Is there anything I can do? And here's what I could do for you. And they'd all jumped on the idea, and all of them gave some version of, oh my God, yes, we absolutely do right now, or I know we have this thing coming up. So Suddenly I had a list of leads. It didn't but remember, my urgency was, okay, well, I have to pay rent next month and I got to eat, and, so what can I would really wanted to get to those firms that were eager to do this now. And so I went into a firm, a great firm. You think it's safe to say the name, or is that weird?
No, you don't say the name.
All right. So it's a great firm in San Francisco, and it's a nice size firm, and they'd offered me a job, but it was too big for me to work in at the time because I was weird. I wanted a small firm. But they said, yeah, come on in. And so I met with a woman named Julia, and she said, what's your rate? And I was naive, and I said,
did you think about it before then?
No, I didn't think that far. And in my mind, I thought, well, the salary I was going to be getting, was going to be around, 20 or 25 an hour.
Right.
So I asked for 20 to 25 an hour.
Exactly.
Now, remember, that was the salary they were offering me. And with that salary was they were going to give me health care. They were going to give me vacation time. And Julia, who's still a friend to this day, she's like, ask for 50.
Did she really? Yeah.
Yeah. She said, just say, she took kindness on me.
Right.
Now, how could I, possibly pull off doubling my kind of mental rate? And here's how. Because she knew what I didn't know at the time.
Right.
Was that I was going to charge them 50. They were going to bill me out at 150.
Right.
So in good conscience, she couldn't pay me 25 an hour.
Right.
Now, of that $50 an hour, at that time, I thought, oh my God, that's awesome. $50 an hour, that's like over $100,000 a year. Well, here's the thing. I got to pay taxes out of that.
Exactly.
I have to now buy my own health insurance out of that. And I don't have any stability whatsoever because there were some weeks they had 40 hours worth of work for me and some weeks they had none.
And just right off the top, I think we talked a little bit about this moonlighting last week, but just right off the top, so we understand this because, financial stuff is not really taught in high schools, and it's certainly not taught in architecture schools. I wish it would be. But right off the top, any income you get, when somebody gives you money for services, that is income. The federal government and the state wants taxes on that income. So it's not, so even if they pay you cash, you're supposed to declare that income. And most of this, all this consulting work would be probably by check. So there's paper trails. So right off the bat, depending on your tax bracket, you're going to pay 20, 25, 30%. So of that $50, Uncle Sam has taken $15 right off the top just because Uncle Sam's a good guy. So it's important to be aware of that. And then there's insurance. So this also goes back to when, Uncle Vinny wants you to design a deck for him and he only wants to pay you $12 an hour. This is why you can't, because you now have to pay taxes on this income. So, So that's lesson number 3, or strategy number 3 is price accordingly. Now we're assuming that as a consultant, we've been working in a firm for a couple of years. We have some experience of what we can offer. This isn't something right out of college that we're trying to do this consulting thing.
No, as a consultant, they're going to expect that you can just hit the ground running. At this point, you're a hired gun. So I was able to, here they throw you to the wolves. They basically throw you into a firm with 35 people and throw you onto a desk and expect you to be able to produce in day one. And at that point, I had a lot of experience, so I was able to just hop in and start cranking out drawings.
So if I'm an intern, which I guess NCARB is trying not to use intern anymore, but let's say I'm graduated school, I'm working my first job in an architecture firm. I've been there 6 months. They're listening to us right now. They're all like, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to go in, I'm going to go into the boss and tell him I'm done, and I'm going to go get consulting work." Don't do that, because 6 months is not enough. We're talking about somebody, just like you said, Eric, it's a hired gun. Like, your stuff is together. You know what to do. So this is something it's hard to put a number of years of experience, but 3 to 5 to even consider this, I would think. Yeah,
you would have had to, 3 to 5 is kind of what I have in mind, and you would have had to go through the process a few times. If you're right out of school, probably all you can do that would be of value to them would be 3D modeling. And you could probably get lucky and find. I'm sure you could find somebody that would hire you for that. But it's not the consulting work that you want. You want consulting work that's going to grow you as a person, and hopefully lead to more and bigger things. So, here I was, I'd gotten $50 an hour, and it was more than money than I'd ever gotten in my life. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be eating caviar every day. And then when taxes and everything set in, you realize it's really not that much, especially in a city like San Francisco.
Well, and then you realize like, oh, $50 an hour sounds so great. And you're thinking 40 hours a week, but sometimes consulting is 15 hours a week.
Right.
Sometimes it is 40 hours a week, but more often than not, it's usually less. And it's, so it all sort of, you got to take all this into account.
So what I did with this firm, with Julia, I then did with 2 other firms. And same thing. And there were some weeks that I worked 80 hours because all 3 firms had stuff for me.
Right.
And there were some weeks where none of them did, like the week before Christmas when they're like, well, it's pretty slow right now.
Right. And I think just back to your point of the benefit that we give the employer, because a lot of what goes on in our minds as potential projects are on the horizon or as projects coming in, it's great, but then it's also like the first question is like, oh, do we have to hire more staff? And I'm not sure this project is big enough to bring in more people. So that's a struggle constantly in firms. So as we were talking about before, it's timing. And if you just happen to come across them when they're asking that question in their mind, which they're doing many times in a year, and maybe a few times a month, we're sort of their savior and be like, oh, great, I don't have to hire a full-time person. I can hire Eric the consultant.
And the beauty of this is, so now I had these kind of relationships with these 3 firms, right? They knew that I was their hired gun. There were some times where they had, one firm had 6 months where they didn't need me at all. But I stayed in touch with them. At that point, I'd already done consulting with them, so I was friends with people at the firm. So I would drop in and have lunch with some of my buddies. So I was always kind of reminding them that I was there. And then as soon as they got busy again and they're like, well, we can't quite hire somebody, let's call Freed and bring him in again. And so I maintained these relationships for years. And it was great for me because I was being honest.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't moonlighting. I wasn't sneaking around. I had my own business cards with my own information. But I had access to a plotter. I had access to code books. I had access to a meeting room, and so I was able to go look for my own projects and be very honest about it. Like, yeah, this is my own. When I would plot things on their plotter, I would pay them for the plots. They even gave me a special code, to plug into the plotter, so they would bill me for it accordingly. Because I would then in turn bill that back to my client.
Right.
So it was this wonderful balancing act of, I got a bunch of kitchen remodels that I can do, but it's not enough for me to live off of. But I know that more is coming. So I could do 3 kitchen remodels and then do some consulting work on the side. And it always gave me enough to really continue making money. And that was a freedom that I needed in order to launch my own firm. That's how I did it. I didn't have a trust fund. I wish I did. I didn't have savings. I wish I did. I didn't graduate from Harvard with a bunch of connections. I wish I did. All I had was this kind of a confidence in myself that I knew that I could do these things for other people. And so I knew I could launch a firm by talking passionately about what I believed in. But in the meantime, I could always at least afford to eat and pay rent. And that was the key.
And I think it's exciting that if we do go into this consulting world, you are your own boss. I mean, you're still obviously beholden to the various firms you're consulting with, but you're your own boss, setting the schedule and what you need. Like, that is very satisfying. Not everybody's going to like that. Some people might be terrified about it. And it's actually now I'm thinking about this, if you have the idea, if you're in your early 20s and someday you want to open your own firm, which I think a lot of us have that, whether we actually do or not is another story, but getting your feet work in consulting is sort of a good way to figure out, like, hey, is that the way I want to go, or maybe I don't? Because you might get into consulting and just don't like it and be like, you know what, a regular job is where I'm at.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be. The beauty of it is that here I was bouncing between these 3 firms. I was then going home and doing my own work. I was really able to get into the culture of these firms and get to know them. And at one point or another, all three would joke, at different times, well, do you want a job? Because they'd all offered me at some point to come in full time. And so the opportunity arises, but in all cases, I kept saying, no, I want to keep doing my own thing, and they would tease me about it, almost like the boyfriend or the girlfriend that refuses to marry you, but you still want to stay together. It was kind of like that.
And I like the idea what you mentioned earlier about honesty, and you were sort of honest with yourself, and you were also honest with the firms you were doing the consulting with. So everything was on the up and up, and it's just, it's the way it's the way it should be.
Yeah, I didn't want to sneak around. I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to do any of that.
You didn't want to misrepresent your skills.
No, it was too. I'm not good at that. I wanted to be free and unencumbered and not have to worry about those things. I wanted to be able to say, yeah, I have other projects and be done with it. But I remember one year, probably 98 or 99, I had to go to 3 Christmas parties because all 3 firms included, I was part of the family, even though I wasn't a full-time employee, and they invited me. They were nice enough to invite me to the Christmas party. So I went to 3 office Christmas parties in a year. It was like going to 3 proms in a year. It was it was fun, and I love those people, and it also gave me an army of friends. Usually you hang out with your work buddies. Well, now I had 3 offices that I was friends with, so I overnight had a lot of new friends to play with.
Which all of this ties into, I don't have the episode handy, but we've been talking about resumes and landing your first job, and a lot of what was coming through, like specifically landing your first job, nailing the interview, was just being personable and sociable and positive. And you're like that, and you were like that, so you made a lot of friends in the architecture community. So that it all sort of ties together.
Yeah, I've always been very outgoing, and I'm able to kind of go into a firm and instantly, just have fun and connect with people and joke with people and build a rapport very quickly. I like people, so I think that helps. If you're like a weird curmudgeon and you're an introvert and you don't like talking to people, consulting might not be for you. You might be better, with a job, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different thing. To me, one of the skills on my list is that I'm good with people, right? So they could wheel me in front of clients. They could put me in front of new staff and have me train new staff, even though I'm only a consultant. Like they liked me and trusted me right away, and I think that helps.
Okay, so of our 5 strategies, we got 1, making a list of the skills that can be useful to others. Number 2, the list of firms that we know or admire. And definitely if we're in metropolitan cities, make sure we're doing networking, AIA functions, harassing our friends. And almost like not even saying to our friends, hey, do you know if your firm's looking for work? Asking your friend and saying, hey, who's your boss? What's their contact information? So then you can contact them directly, because your friend's never going to, get back to you.
No, or better yet, go in and visit your buddy for lunch.
Oh,
at his or her firm.
Yeah, befriend everybody.
Say, dude, I want to shake hands with the principal. Go introduce me to her.
Exactly.
And it's really simple as that.
3, setting your price accordingly. So, and I would recommend, there's a ton of stuff on being a consultant online already. So if you're serious about this, check some of that stuff out in terms of consultant rates, all that stuff. What is number 4?
Number 4 is a slightly alternative approach to this. And in the show notes and on the website, we're going to give you a list of sites where you can find requests for proposals, RFPs. Now, if you don't know what an RFP is, you might remember hearing about it in your professional practice class. But an RFP is when, let's say, a city is looking to build a new city hall. And so they put out an RFP, a request for proposal, asking for architects to submit ideas and proposals for doing that. Imagine if instead of calling these people saying, hey, do you have any consulting work for me? Imagine instead if you call them and say, I have a project for us to do together.
Right.
It's a very different approach, but basically go through this list of request for proposal sites, RFP sites. Most of them you can set up a free account with. Or you can just go to an individual city page. If you live in Lincoln, Nebraska, go to the Lincoln, Nebraska city web page, and you'll see somewhere on there, it'll say something like opportunities or RFPs or working with the city. It's one of those three things. And so on the individual page, you'll see the list of all the RFPs that your city is now offering. Imagine if you go call up a firm and say, hey, the city is looking for someone to build a new fire station. I've got experience with that. What if we do it together? Let's put together a dream team and do it together. You're coming to them with an opportunity. They might already know about the RFP. And in fact, they might even say, yeah, we saw that, but we weren't going to do it because we didn't have enough fire station experience. But if you do, maybe together we could do it. So you're coming to them with an opportunity in hand of let's go pitch this and get this together.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and you used to do that kind of stuff, right? Like you were always going through that. I don't have the patience for that, but
So I do it all. I do it all the time. I do it once a week. It's just a standard thing that I do. Is I take half an hour.
So you still do it?
I still do it,
yeah.
And I scroll through these RFP sites, and there are national sites that you can pay for, where they'll search every city site, or I just have a list of the kind of 5 main cities around me, and I click the links and I bookmark them all, and I just go to each one and see, okay, any new RFPs come out today, and then let's say San Francisco School District's building a new school. Well, everybody in town's probably excited about that, but very quickly teams are going to start to form, and I'm their sustainability consultant, right? So I could go in and I could call all 3 of my firms that I was buddies with and say, hey, you guys all have school experience, put me on as your sustainability consultant.
Right.
So suddenly now, not only have I brought them work, which they like and appreciate, but I've also put myself on 3 different project teams. So I've increased my chances of getting the job threefold.
Right.
And so no matter who wins that job, which of these 3 firms, because I'm their sustainability consultant, suddenly now I have another 9 to 12 months worth of consulting work to do.
So this is a great avenue if somebody has a specialty like that, whether it be sustainability or fire stations or schools, somebody who has that specialty, that opportunity exists.
Yeah, and you probably do. It's just finding the right RFP. And in fact, when you go to these sites, you could type, if all your experience has been in healthcare and that's all you know, type in, hospital or healthcare and see what comes up on these sites. And like I said, we're providing a list in the show notes, so you could just start to go there and see how it all works.
All right, that's a great one. A lot of initiative there. That's a lot of initiative there.
It also shows the mindset that you're coming to serve them, right?
Yes.
So, here I've got this RFP in hand. Can I email it to you and let's talk about it? Or can I come in and let's go over it and see? A lot of firms will say, well, we saw that RFP, but we don't, we're too busy right now to propose for it. We don't have time to write a proposal. Or we saw that RFP and it's due next week and we can't pull it together in time. And here's where you could even offer to take the lead and say, well, what if I start writing the proposal for us?
Well, and I think the same thing we've been saying this whole show is just being persistent and timing. So they may not be interested in this one, but 2 months later, hit them again and be like, we've been thinking about that. Now we're in a position. Let's put something together. So again, it's that just stay in contact.
Exactly.
All right, and then finally, what's number 5?
Number 5 is also a bit of an alternative, and this is the 1 day a week model, I call it. Let's say you have a job. Let's say you really like your job. You love the people. They've got a softball league. Every Friday they go out for drinks. You really like them there, and they treated you really well. But you still want to go off on your own. You don't have a trust fund. You don't have savings. You don't have a Rolodex full of connections. But you want to go off on your own, and you think that the only way to do that is, sometime I'm going to have to quit my job and just start. You don't. There's another alternative, and this is the 1 day a week plan. This is where you go to your boss and say, I really love working here. I love what you do. You've been a great mentor to me. You've been very supportive of me, but I have these other things I want to pursue that you guys don't do. Could I propose to you as an idea that I take off 1 day a week? You're not going to pay me for that day. You're only going to pay me for the days I work. but let me have that 1 day a week to go pursue these other ideas that don't compete with you at all. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds nuts. What boss is going to agree to that? But I can tell you, as someone who's had a lot of staff, if I had a good staff member, I would rather have them for 80% of the time than for 0.
Yeah.
I would rather keep them for 80% of the time and know they're happy and satisfied than risk losing them entirely. And the best part is you're not giving up all of your salary. You're giving up 1 day a week, 20% of it. So you could go pursue, let's say you work in a firm that does all commercial and you want to pursue residential. Let's say you work in a firm that does all healthcare and you want to pursue something else on your own. This is a way to do that. And believe it or not, it's not totally insane. The worst that your boss could say is no, but they will respect you for coming to them as a professional.
Yeah, if they're a good boss, they could still say no, but do it sort of in a respectful and give you reasons why or whatever. But what you just said has stuck to me. Why would your boss agree to that? And I might be thinking, like, why would my boss agree to that? Like you said, if you're good, they would rather have you 80% of the time. And we've said this over and over in other podcasts. Just because you're really good at your job, don't assume everybody else is really good at the job, because chances are they're not. As employers, we've employed over the years, not everybody is great. In fact, very few employees are actually great. So those that are great, can carry some weight. And those that are great can, get accommodations met, if they're sort of approached in the right way.
Yeah, it's hard to find good people, and when you find them, you want to hold on to them. And if I had someone, I think of it as a family, and if one of my family, my staff comes to me and says, I want to start, this has happened. I want to start this nonprofit. I've been trying to do it on evenings and weekends, but I need more. I want to invest more time in it. Could I take off every other Wednesday? Could I take off every Wednesday? And be flexible about it, right? So, of course, if there's a meeting, I'll work that day instead and switch out my day for something else. But make it clear to them that you would like that kind of dedicated time to focus on other things. And don't do it in their office. Don't say, on Wednesdays, I'm not going to work on your stuff, but I'm still going to come in. Go to a coffee shop, or if you really need the space, you can rent, a cubicle from someone else's. But you don't want to confuse the two.
Yeah, if you're out that day, be out. Like, if that's not your day, be out.
Right, because you'll be interrupted with calls and emails and other staff saying, hey, what about this? So be out that day, but make it clear, and everyone will know. And you might have even experienced this in your firm where there's, hey, that girl's never in on Wednesdays.
It just reminded me a good strategy for this, because, this is assuming you're a good employee, so you probably have a good relationship with your boss and your boss respects you. So rather than go into the office, take them out to lunch. Take he or she out to lunch and just say, hey, can we have lunch? There's, something I want to chat with you about. And they're going to be like, uh-oh. They're going to be ready for like your 2-week notice. So then you give them this scenario and they're like, oh, okay. No, they're happy. You're going to be there 80% of the time.
They might even know about this. It might even start out the conversation by saying, as you know, I'm very interested in helping homeless people, or whatever. Right. Or I'm very interested in the arts, because they know you. I mean, you talk about, everybody talks about their personal life at work. So this probably wouldn't be a total shock to them. If anything, it'd be like, oh my God, this is great. You're not leaving them in the lurch. You're not giving them notice. You're not leaving them high and dry. You're giving them a solution. You're coming to them with a solution saying, I just want this 1 day a week where I could focus on this other thing. Is that okay? And don't demand it. Just ask it. And they might say no. They might say, well, we're very crunched right now, but how about after this project ends? Then you could start doing that.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, I like that. If the boss is worth their salt and the boss respects you, I would think something could get worked out. But to your point, don't demand it. Ask. And if they say no, say, well, can we revisit this conversation in 2 months or something like that? A good boss is going to be very, very responsive and respected or respective of your question. All right. So our 5 strategies. Number 1, make a list of all the skills that you can do that are going to be useful to others. Number 2, a list of firms that you know or admire. Number 3, price accordingly. So setting your consultant rate accordingly. Number 4, RFPs, which sounds like a lot of work to me, but a good opportunity and something that Eric does in his free time. Likes to scroll through those. And then number 5, if you have a full-time job, maybe you're taking 1 day a week to explore that as well. I think that's going to wrap it up for us. On behalf of Eric Corey Freed, my name is David Doucette, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the ARE Podcast. Be sure to visit architectexamprep.com and check out our other podcast episodes, video tips, and the ARE blog. Remember to plan, practice, and pass.